Argentina has faced repeated economic crises over the years, with factors like political instability, currency devaluation, and external debt contributing to these challenges. Fed up with establishment politics, the Argentinian population voted in a fringe candidate named Javier Milei. Since then, Argentina has fallen further into chaos. What exactly led to this libertarian free market disaster? In this episode, we'll analyze the economic crisis in Argentina, why it's happening, and what the results have been so far. If you enjoy what we do, then don't forget to like the video and check out our Patreon for exclusive content and early releases. Argentina has a long history of economic crises, with the most recent occurring in 2018. But let's start a bit further back. From 1890 to 1950, the per capita income of Argentina reached that of Western Europe. A fact frequently repeated by those who attempt to paint Argentina's fall from grace as the fault of leftist nationalization policies. But the reality is, though Argentina did have a high per capita income, the distribution of that income remained significantly less equitable. One example of this was the relationship between height and economic growth, which revealed that though GDP increased, average Argentinian height didn't, suggesting that the population's welfare did not meaningfully improve during the income expansion of that period. Inflation, a frequent scourge of Argentinian development, was always lurking. During the military dictatorship from the mid-70s onwards, the economy continued to decline. Unpopular neoliberal policies of financial liberalization were pushed through, increasing the country's debt burden and failing to curtail inflation, which soared to 344% in 1983. Record foreign debt payments, tax evasion, and capital flight led to large and untenable deficits, resulting in stagflation and hyperinflation in 1989 and 1990. Seeing this, many Argentine establishment economists believed further free market policies would solve the issue, and in an attempt to relieve the economy, the peso was pegged to the US dollar in 1991. This was followed by limiting money supply growth, trade liberalization, deregulation, and privatization. Though inflation calmed slightly, in 2001, Argentina experienced an economic collapse. In the sharpest drop since 1930, the country defaulted on its debt, experienced a nearly 20% decline in GDP, a 25% unemployment rate, and a 70% depreciation of the peso. This resulted in some common sense changes, with the renationalization of several key state assets, including the Postal Service, the Buenos Aires water utility, pension funds, the national airline, energy firms, and railways. In an attempt to restructure its burdensome debt, Argentina approached various issuers, including small investors, hedge funds, and vulture funds, that is, investors who invest in precarious debt considered to be very weak or in default, hoping to negotiate more favorable payment terms. They immediately rejected both the 2005 and 2010 offers to exchange those defaulted bonds, with some demanding $832 million for bonds purchased for a paltry $49 million. NML Capital Limited, a vulture fund that specializes in purchasing the precarious debt of developing nations, had bought up Argentine public bonds at extreme discounts during the earlier economic crash. Once they were approached for restructuring, they attempted to seize Argentine government assets abroad and sued to halt payments to the 93% of issuers who had accepted earlier debt repayment discounts. Eventually, NML received $2.4 billion, a 392% return on the original bond value. All of this is despite a good portion of the country's debt originating in borrowing done by illegitimate military dictatorships, though Argentina continues to service it to this day, at a rate of $14 billion per year. Since the early 2000s, a series of neoliberal governments have yet again resulted in a rapid depreciation of the peso, skyrocketing inflation, rising unemployment, and a decline in general economic activity. Hoping to patch up their failures with government subsidies, Argentina was led into an even larger fiscal deficit. In May 2018, Argentina sought intervention from the IMF, requesting a $30 billion emergency loan. By 2023, the inflation rate in Argentina exceeded 100% for the first time since the early 1990s. The pandemic only made things worse, causing a general recession and the shuttering of many businesses. Unemployment, poverty rates, and austerity measures greatly reduced quality of life, and IMF borrowing only further worsened the situation. The institution, known for imposing cost-cutting measures on nations it loans to, forced Argentina to further slash government spending, which has continued the downward spiral to this day. Years of neoliberal governments eroded trust in establishment politics in the lead-up to the latest election, and as a result, the country saw many protest votes in favor of a fringe, far-right candidate named Javier Milei. A self-titled economist and television personality known best for his anarcho-capitalist, libertarian, and right-wing views, Milei rose to prominence through appearances on various TV shows and debates. A cosplayer, Milei has a superhero persona called General ANCAP, which he has frequently displayed seemingly without a hint of embarrassment. In November 2021, Milei was elected to the Argentine Chamber of Deputies, representing the city of Buenos Aires for La Libertad Avanza, a far-right coalition known for its libertarian, anti-communist, and pro-dictatorship positions. Their policies include the shuttering of state ministries, fully dismantling over half of them, a 15% reduction in public spending, the reduction of taxes, aiming to eliminate 90% of them, eliminating labor regulations, proposing the abolition of the central bank, and removing state subsidies for public infrastructure. In 2022, he ran for the presidency with the Libertarian Party, showcasing bombastic stunts like spreading a video of him tearing cards from a board with the names of ministries he wants to abolish, or waving around a chainsaw on stage to symbolize cuts to so-called government bloat, or calling Pope Francis a filthy leftist. Immediately following his victory, he announced that Argentina would pull out of BRICS consideration right before joining, as well as immediately institute shock therapy. Following this, he began pushing through the policies issued by Libertad Avanza, as well as modifying the law prohibiting the appointment of family members so that he could appoint his sister, with whom he has a questionable relationship, to the position of General Secretary of the Presidency. He then signed Decree 70/2023, titled Basis for the Reconstruction of the Argentine Economy. This was done through executive decree, a controversial and possibly illegal move. Made up of 366 articles, the decree slashed labor rights such as compensation for fired workers, made various forms of protest illegal, and abolished rent control regulations, while allowing rent to be set in dollars rather than pesos. The General Confederation of Labor, Argentina's largest union, has called for a general strike in January 2024 over the law. Meanwhile, Milei himself is no stranger to controversies. Campaign financing reports have revealed that he received no private contributions or donations for Libertad Avanza, and that it was financed exclusively through state funding, despite his calls for elimination of state subsidies and support for political participation. He's been called a compulsive plagiarist, having allegedly plagiarized several others for his opinion columns and books. He's spoken in favor of the sale of human organs, and philosophically mused over the selling of children before backtracking following outrage at what he was implying. He was accused of selling political appointments for $50,000, and publicly promoted a crypto-based pyramid scheme through his online platforms. In various interviews, Milei has engaged in the denial of state terrorism in Argentina during the Dirty War, a taboo in Argentina following the disappearance of tens of thousands during the military dictatorship period. But perhaps most serious of his controversies is the presence of neo-Nazis in his administration and support base, people whom Milei has described as patriots. Having made several comments promoting the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory, Milei has also called climate change a socialist lie, stating that it's a deception promoted by the neo-Marxists. The recent economic measures introduced by Milei have resulted in a drastic devaluation of the peso by over 100%, followed by the elimination of state subsidies for fuel, transport, water, and electricity. Unsurprisingly, prices have surged, fully doubling for food and fuel, which has exacerbated the already difficult situation faced by everyday Argentines. Milei hasn't stopped there, though, continuing to declare layoffs for all public employees with less than 1 year of seniority, the halting of ongoing public infrastructure projects, and a general promise not to enter into new contracts for future public works. One of Milei's most outrageous acts is his repeated pledge to abolish the central bank by transitioning to a dollarized economy, as well as cutting off trade with Brazil and China, two nations which he has labeled as communist governments. This has greatly affected investment security within Argentina, as Brazil and China are Argentina's primary trading partners, accounting for a massive 40% of trade. What's more, the country currently lacks the necessary reserves for dollarization of the economy, as well as access to international funding to borrow their way towards that goal. Using urgent decree powers, Milei is attempting to repeal price control laws, privatize state-owned entities like the national airline, the state oil company, media companies, rail networks, and the capital's water and sewage provider. Even football clubs in Argentina won't be spared. Whenever the working class is targeted, the capitalist class gets a kickback. And in this case, it's particularly profound. Owners of industry and capital are seeing regulations on land ownership eliminated, foreign export controls lifted, favors to private pharmaceutical production, and the tearing down of workers' healthcare plans. Big business continues to be favored at every turn, as Milei is attempting to get the central bank to borrow up to $30 billion so that they can issue what he's calling bonds for the reconstruction of a free Argentina. These bonds, purchasable in pesos by importers, will be repaid in dollars in 2027 in an attempt to bail out importing companies burdened by debt. This essentially shifts private business debt over to the central bank, making it the job of regular Argentines to pay off the loans of private corporations. Besides the catastrophe of the current situation, the general strike scheduled for January 24th is being met with draconian policies aiming to curtail and dissuade public protests. Arrest warrants that bypass the need for a court order are now in effect, and Milei's government is further attempting to restrict the right to strike, the right of assembly, and the right to engage in collective bargaining. More than 40 legal challenges have been filed condemning Milei's decree as unconstitutional, while a court has temporarily suspended the labor reform chapter of his decree. Markets have also not reacted well, as consumer prices have soared 211%, making Argentina the nation with the fastest growing inflation in Latin America as the IMF unlocks $4.7 billion in loans for Milei's government. Only time will tell how this situation will develop, but the neoliberal and far-right playbook of deregulation and attacks on the working class seems to be the goal once again. The Argentinian working class, much like Chile's after the overthrow of the democratically elected Allende, will have to face a hostile and repressive state apparatus as they fight to maintain the gains they have made. And hopefully, with time, they'll come out on top. In this moment of sharpening class struggle, only through proper organizing and a legitimate political program can the Argentinian people finally escape the never-ending cycle of IMF indebtment and neoliberalization. These analysis episodes are only possible thanks to our generous patrons. As a little thank you for your support, all patrons get early access to analysis episodes, as well as an audio version of the news. If you'd like to help support the show, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.